All right, class video 11, the slides that go with it. This is the last video, the last set of slides leading up into the midterm exam. So there's quite a bit in here, and I'm going to make a note and an announcements. If you look through these slides, if you follow through with this video, there is a lot of stuff to it helps tie all these concepts from the first half of the class together. And so as I look at this, it's like, wow, there's a lot on here that looks like it's perfect questions for the midterm exam. That's a little bit of a hint for you. So I would focus on paying attention, taking a few notes, because this will definitely help. I have one really short miniature almost piece of tech time. So let me bring that up just quickly. Okay, and what it has to do with is the midterm itself. So when it's time to do that, and on the syllabus I have the window 4 to 7 November. I'm probably going to open it up even a day earlier than that, just to give more time. So if you're ready to take it, remember, open book, 2-hour time limit, because it is a little bit longer. I don't think you'll need anywhere close to that, but it's there and available for you. But to find the midterm lessons, and notice now we finished up week 3, so it's still there, but again, I moved it down to the bottom. If there's anything you need to look at from there, I have not yet, because there was a little tech issue with the computers freaking out. So the first 2 quizzes are in the quizzes and test folder, and as soon as the tech issue is resolved, I'll make this quiz 2 available. So that's a good study piece, prepping for the midterm. And then to take it, just go to the midterm exam folder. Again, it's in there. I can see it on my end. I don't know if you can read that. Item is hidden from students. So when it's time for that to become available, all I do is hit the button, make available, and bam. You go to that, open the midterm, and take it just like you've taken all the quizzes. 45 true, false, multiple choice, and 3 short answer questions that are akin to what you've seen on the quizzes. So 2, 3, 4 sentences. It's not a 5-paragraph essay. Just answer the question. And one more hint for you. If you remember back to test taking, which had to do with the kind of an intro to stress, which we're going to talk more about today. But test taking can be stressful. But one of the things you want to do is, I called it RTFQ, read the frickin' question, read the full question. Make sure you read it, especially when it's a short answer or essay. There may be 2 or 3 parts to it. So you want to make sure you answer all those parts to get maximum credit. So that's where you'll take it. When you get done, you hit submit. I'll see that it's done, grade it, get it back to you. And once that's done, and I'll mention it when we get to class video 12, when we kick off week 5, not until November 8th. Midterm is a good time to assess how am I doing. Some of you got off to a slow start, right? I was missing an assignment here and there. Now, what you'll see as we get closer to the finish line is, just like the syllabus says, I drop either your lowest quiz or worksheet, 1, whichever one's going to help your grade the most. So you'll see your grade get better than what it shows in Grade Center. Right? But there's no way to know what that's going to be until we get toward the end. So it's not trying to be tricky or anything. It's just I got to look at it and see, okay, which one's going to benefit this student the most, and then drop it. So what you see in Grade Center will very often get at least a little bit better if you haven't missed any assignments, or maybe even not a lot, but some better because you had a 0 on a worksheet or a quiz. Okay, that's it for tech time. And bear with me. I got so much stuff open. It's terrible. All right, driving on. So you can see all that we're kind of wrapping up here. The ethical dilemma worksheet, you see that's due November 5th. Again, go through and kind of define, look up, figure out what an ethical dilemma is. In fact, while I'm doing that, why not just, I'll bring it up. Again, bear with me. I should have brought this up ahead of time, and sometimes I'm not thinking I had enough either. I got so much stuff open, my computer's probably going to explode. There it is. Okay. Hey, don't forget to put your name in. Right, I've had a couple. I can figure out whose it is. Define ethics. And it says use any source you want. So go ahead and look it up online or a dictionary or whatever it is, and then just give credit. And a lot of you guys did a good job, I thought, on the question about intrinsic, extrinsic motivation, of giving a kind of a citation. Here's where I got the info. So same idea here. And now you can see in your words, define an ethical dilemma. You may need to look up dilemma just so you can give a better answer here. Is there a difference between ethics and morals? How do we learn these things? And then I've mentioned this before, I'll mention it one more time. There's 5 scenarios at the bottom. Pick one. You can delete all the other ones that you're not going to answer, and that'll give you plenty of space to talk about which of those you choose. And again, this is your opinion, but it says describe how you would resolve it. And ethical dilemmas are tough because there's maybe no one good answer. In fact, maybe all the answers are a little bit bad. Okay, so I should have had that up, saved us a little time. A little more on success, failure, teams, right? Especially as a leader, you're going to deal with success and failure, time management, communications, critical thinking. All these pieces, all these things we've talked about early in the class, trying to bring those to a good conclusion for you. Okay, and so let me start with a quote, and I think this quote has to do with time management. It's from a book called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. It's one of my favorite books. I mean, look at this thing. It's taped together. I've read it so many times. It's fallen apart. Right, but you can see I've got a bunch of different pieces of it marked. And I've probably read this a dozen times. It's like a once a year I start reading it again. It has to do with philosophy. But the author is talking about he's got a problem with his motorcycle. And so he decides, well, it's too complicated for me to fix. He takes it into a shop, and the shop used to be run by a bunch of old timers. Now, as he goes in, he hasn't been there in quite a while. It's a bunch of young folks, and there's nothing bad about that. But he looks around, and the music's blasting, the place is a mess. They seem to not really care about what they're doing. He goes back to pick up his motorcycle, and it's not fixed. So he takes it back, and then they make it worse, and they break the head on the motorcycle. Finally, it's like, just give it to me. And he gets it out of there and finds all but one of the engine bolts is loose or missing. And he thinks back on it, and he goes, it occurred to me there's no real manual that deals with the real business of motorcycle maintenance. You would think, okay, a maintenance manual of some kind, right? If you're working on your car. It used to be we had, Haynes manuals. Now, heck, first thing I do is look at YouTube. But a manual, something about how to do it. But he says, no, that's not the real business, not turning wrenches. The most important thing about motorcycle maintenance or about anything that you do is caring about what you're doing. If you don't care about what you're doing, you know what the results are going to be. It's going to come out lousy. You go, oh, what does that have to do with time management? Well, think about this. If I can better manage my time, oftentimes what people think is if I do better with time management, I can make my list of stuff I got to do today, right? And if my time management's better, man, I can cross off more things in a day. That's true. But what about this? What if I manage my time better and give myself an extra 30 minutes or hour and a half to think about an important decision or to do a better job about putting my engine together in my race car? I think effective time management gives you more time to do a better job as well, not just crossing more things off your list. That's why I like this quote. And I keep it in my head a lot, that if I start to rush, usually I'm going to make a mistake. So it is about time management. Okay, concept. Talking about that. Management. We talked about in the realm of leadership management that leaders are more long-term, longer thinking, more at risk if the company doesn't do well. Managers, more the day-to-day operations. This is another thought. Yeah, some control. So that goes back to the management definition. But now add this. So if that's management, then time management is what? The act, manner, or practice of managing time. But then the question is, and this may get a little bit philosophical, I tend to get that way sometimes. So that means we can control. That's the last word here, right? This bolded word. Can we control time? What do you think? I think the answer is no. The clock's ticking. It never stops. But what we can do is manage what we do with our time. And again, that goes back to, yes, maybe I can get a few more things done on my list of stuff, which is a time management tool, making a list of things I have to get done in a given day, or I can have more time to do a really good job. Okay, so no, we can't control. We can control what we do with it. And just another kind of food for thought, as it kind of lends back into the leadership discussion a little bit. If you've had a boss somewhere along the line that seemed to just run around hair on fire all the time, don't mistake that for getting a lot done. And in my experience, people who run around with their hair on fire all the time, often that's a defense mechanism because they don't know what they're doing. Either they can't control their time or they simply don't know. So I'm so busy, you have to leave me alone. Okay, so don't mistake the two. Busy might mean you're getting a lot done. It might not. Okay. A lot of words of the day. And this is where I was saying, boy, this would be probably the best set of slides to review, maybe have available as you take the midterm. We kind of know what courage is, and this will make more sense as we get into, there's 2 4-square charts we're going to look at. We looked at one about leadership a couple videos ago, about how as your followers, as your employees get better at their job, you should back away and not be the micromanager. Okay? Same thing here, and this is why I'm hitting these. So we'll do them fairly quickly. They're simple. The ability to do something that frightens you. Okay? So courage is about you. And honestly, a lot of times courage really is going ahead and doing something that you're scared of. Right? We tend to think of courage as like, D-Day, invading the Normandy coast of France. Yeah, those guys were petrified, I'm sure, but they went ahead and did it anyways. Okay, so that idea of courage. So strength in the face of fear, pain, greed. And we think about it as being this big macro heroic kind of event. Sometimes courage is raising your hand in class because you don't understand something. And now, ooh, everybody's going to think I'm stupid. Well, who cares? If you don't know, ask. Same with this as an online class. Send me an email. Get on the chat. Okay? Consideration. If we're considerate, if that's the word we use, if you're a considerate person, what do? It kind of relates to empathy, but a considerate person thinks about other people. Okay? They consider, that's one definition. I give careful thought over time, right? I'm going to consider that position. I'm going to consider that idea. But the other definition, and I should have put it on here, is the idea of consideration for others. Okay? Careful thought about other people. So that sort of fits that definition. That's not the greatest. A compromise means we meet in the middle. And that used to be, at least in part, a function of our government, that neither side got exactly what they wanted. So they would give up some things, gain some things, and meet in the middle, and that was the compromise. Anymore with this ridiculous filibuster thing. If you don't do what I want, I'm just not going to vote for it, and it's dead in the water. That's why nothing gets done in Washington, is compromise is a dirty word. Ugh, getting preachy. This is an odd one, but you hear it sometimes, and it has to do with the thing we're going to talk about, a zero-sum game. That means one side wins, one side loses. So there's no net gain. There's no compromise where both sides get some of what they wanted. One side wins, one side loses. Thus, it's a zero sum. Right? +2 -2. So the end result is 0. We see a lot of that. There's some places where you see it because it's a natural course of how it's done. Think about sports, right? And this last one, and these do jump around a little bit, but just to get them in a couple slides, the idea of diversity, because we're going to get, as toward the finish line, we're going to talk about diversity here. And that's just the simple idea of bringing in different ideas, different people, different whatever it is. And again, in the classroom, we can look around and go, yep, this is a pretty diverse bunch. You're going to have men and women, white, black, Hispanic, different ethnic backgrounds, different religions, right? Different races. So a varied group. And very often that helps when we're trying to find a solution, because we have 7, 8, 9, 10 different ideas that all come from different people who come from a different place in the world. Remember that idea of being subjective, that we all grow up in our paradigm, we see the world differently. So that helps bring that together. That's diversity. All right, that's page one. I got another page of words of the day. And again, the first ones of these help with the a Foursquare. Something that's important. This isn't rocket science either. Great or significant value, likely to have a profound effect on success or even survival. It's important to have food, water, shelter, that basic level of Maslow's hierarchy, isn't it? Whereas urgent, oftentimes we mix these. They're not synonymous. Right? Something that requires immediate attention. Right? And I'd give you an example, or in class I'd ask for one. What's something that's really not all that important, but makes you react immediately? And I would say your phone. When your phone rings, is that an important phone call? It could be. Oftentimes, I don't know, 90% of the time, it's not that important, right? They can leave a voicemail, they can call back. But when that phone rings, it drives us to, God, I gotta get that phone, right? Or the alarm going off on your microwave. Man, everything in my kitchen at this point, I think either beeps, squeaks, yells, screams, something to get my attention. Is it that important? No. Right? Whatever's in the microwave can stay there for another minute or two while I do something else. So don't confuse those two. Right? Immediate action, urgent, maybe not important. In fact, often not important. Okay, leaders. One of the things, maybe I should have brought this up in the last week, but this idea of delegating. Give someone else the power to act on your behalf. But my question is, one, how much do you delegate? If you're a leader, you can't give everything to everybody else. You still got that leadership position. And the other is, when you delegate something, make sure those folks know what you expect. Oftentimes we'll tell people, do this, and that's all the guidance they're given. And they're like, okay, how, what, why? So make sure you explain, here's what I want done, and here's how I want you to do it. Now, it doesn't have to be micromanaging, but at least you tell them, here's what I expect. Here's the result I want. Now go forth and prosper and act on my behalf. Because as a leader, you can't do everything. And this last one kind of goes with the idea of diversity, the interaction of two or more groups. Synergy, in my mind, the way I think of it is like a basketball team. You may have 5 very good players, but they can beat a team full of all-stars if they play as a team and that other team plays like a bunch of individuals. So the sum is greater than the individual pieces, if that makes sense. That's how really good winning teams get that way. I thought I heard something. Right? And so I can express that mathematically. Usually I'll post this on the board and leave it just so it drives the math teachers insane. 1 + 1 = 3. Now think of that in the workplace, in the idea of a diverse group. 1 + 1. So I've got my idea, you've got your idea, and now if we put them together, we have our idea. Or maybe 3 or 4 or 5, because we use little pieces of each one. And think about it in a group of 7, 8, 10 people, using little pieces of those ideas. So we can come up with 20, 30, 50 possible solutions. My idea, your idea, our ideas is probably the right answer. But that's synergy. So 1 + 1 = 3. Okay, and this is why we started off with some of the definitions that we did. And you can draw this box any way you want, but it's a relationship box. And if you remember, let's go back and talk about courage. That was an individual skill, right? My courage in the face of something I'm afraid of. Consideration was consideration thinking about others. Right, so I think there's a way to simplify this. This is how it's typically drawn, and you can see down here I've given credit to where it came from. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. A guy named Covey wrote this. What if we call this others? What if we call the consideration box others? And what if we call the courage box ourselves? I think this makes it easier. So what you do is you look at the X and Y axis, and it doesn't matter which box you put these in because it works both directions. If I have low consideration for others, I don't care about you, and I don't care about myself. I have low courage, and what I get is kind of a lose-lose situation. And we'll talk about each of these. Whereas if I jack that up to I have high consideration for you and high consideration for myself, it doesn't mean all I think of is me, me, me. I think of both of us. Then that puts us up here in the win-win. And then you can see each one of these is one side's going to lose, one side's going to win. That's zero-sum game. Okay? So you're like, okay, great. But how do I determine which box to put this in? The last piece of this is, if you think about this, in not in an egotistical way again, but you come first. So a win-lose, I win, you lose. That means I have high consideration for myself, but I don't really care about you. That's what puts this one down here. And then you reverse it. Lose-win. Lots of consideration for other people, but not so much for myself. Okay? So let's look at all four of those and maybe expand it even just a little bit more. Get some concrete examples of when this would happen. Win-win, the idea of compromise. A solution that helps us both. No, we don't get everything we want, but we get a good piece of it, and both of us get something out of this situation. Okay? Why is it not done more? I don't know. It seems like we've become much more of a win-lose, and it's I win, you lose mentality in our culture. Now, sometimes that's fine. I mean, a football game or an election. One side wins, one side loses, even if sometimes they argue they didn't. One side wins, one side loses. It's a zero-sum game, right? Pittsburgh beat Cleveland Browns this weekend. Boo-hoo, Cleveland's my team. So Pittsburgh gets the victory, Cleveland gets the loss, right? Yes, I know there is a chance for a tie in the NFL. I wish they did it like college football, believe me. Okay? So those are the first two. Win-win. We all get something out of it. Win-lose. One side wins, the other one loses. Maybe the tougher one is this, lose-win, where I don't. I purposely put others before myself. And sometimes that can be this idea of a victim, right? People are always using me. But is there a time where we purposefully do this? Where you put other people first? And I would say there's a few. But one of the easiest ones to think about is if you have a small child, right? You're the parent. Oftentimes we will put our own needs and desires second to take care of the kid or take them to soccer practice or whatever it is. So there is a time where we do this. Not all the time. You don't always want to be in the losing column. But helping other people, right? Charity work, things like that. Putting my time into somebody else's helping someone else. And of course, this would be the worst one, lose-lose. We both lose out of this. And I see this with revenge. If you think of like a really acrimonious, a really nasty divorce, I'm going down and I'm taking you with me. Both sides lose. Right? So that does happen as well. So I would ask you this in the classroom. Which of these do you think is the most common in U.S. culture? And I would say probably win-lose. Although you could argue we do still see some win-win thinking, some compromise. Okay? But it's an opinion question. So the question at the bottom, is there potential for more than just 4? And this is a little outside the box thinking. This is Mike's opinion. I haven't really seen this quantified anywhere, but I think there are a couple more. And sometimes with that Covey Foursquare, they'll introduce one of these as a kind of goes with win-win, which I don't buy it, but that's just me again. So here would be my additional, and that there's a win, period. There is no other side, because to have a win-lose, I have to at least acknowledge you're there. And what I see more and more of is win at all costs, and I don't care what happens to you. As long as I win, I don't care. Then I'm splitting hairs maybe. But bear with me, because I got a couple examples where I've seen this happen, and it seems to be happening maybe more frequently than it used to. This is the one from Covey's book that he talks about, a no deal he'll plug in as kind of a caveat to the win-win, and like selling a car, okay, $40,000, I'll give you $30,000. Well, generally you're going to meet at $35,000, somewhere in the middle, and then the deal gets done. The person gets the car, and I sell it and get the $35,000, whatever it is. So compromise. But we can go 40, 30, 38, 32, and it's like, no, it's, you don't want to pay enough, and I'm not interested in selling it at that level. So we walk away. No deal. Okay, no harm, no foul. I see it as a paradigm, but maybe I don't know that that goes with win-win necessarily. Okay, so some examples. These are Blue Star videos. I have a bunch of these for this segment. So again, you can watch a couple of them. I would recommend watching the second one. We're going to talk about that a little bit more. But win-lose, and sometimes it's not just win, but humiliating the opponent, trash talking. Man, I hate that. Just, you score the touchdown, give the ball to the ref. Like Derrick Henry of the Titans, man, that guy's a human wrecking ball. He's unstoppable most of the time. And when he scores, he doesn't dance around. He gives the ball to the ref. And as Jim Brown, one of the greatest running backs ever, said, act like you've been there before. And he does that. In this case, this soccer player, Pepe, it's in Spanish, so you may not understand the language potentially, but you can understand the actions and the humiliation, trying to physically hurt the opponent. It's an example of bad sportsmanship, which to me fits under this a little bit. And of course, not everybody's that way, because there is good sportsmanship, and that's what this second one's about. It's about a bad call by an umpire that ruined what's known as a perfect game in baseball, which almost never happens. Okay, and it was the last out of the game. And the guy's name was Andres Galarraga, great pitcher. Okay? And that could have gotten really ugly. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that one. So there's Jim Joyce was the umpire, Andres Galarraga pitching for the Detroit Tigers. And what happened was that last out, he got the call completely wrong. The guy was out. He was out by a mile, and he called him safe. And then what happened next was the whole point of this. Both sides lost in the initial situation. The ump, Joyce, made a bad call. Galarraga lost the chance to go down. I mean, you pitch a perfect game, you're about bound for the Hall of Fame because it happens so infrequently. So Galarraga, he could have gone crazy at the umpire, but he didn't, right? Galarraga got on TV, an interview after the game, and he says, nobody's perfect. Everybody makes mistakes. And then Jim Joyce, the umpire, the next day they were still playing. The two teams were still playing. It was the Indians and the Tigers. And he got out there and he met with Galarraga and he apologized. And no kidding, in the video, watch it, I recommend you watch it. It kind of reinstills your hope in humanity. You see him do this, where he's wiping the tears away because he knew he blew it. And he admitted that on a radio interview afterwards. He's like, I blew the call. Totally. It's all my fault. So instead of both sides losing, right, bad call, lost no-hitter, or a perfect game, excuse me, I don't know if it comes all the way up to a win-win, but they both at least agreed to meet in the middle. I blew the call, nobody's perfect, move on. I think it's a great example of sportsmanship. Okay? So it can change where that win, lose, win-win, right? And so another one, sports is a very good example. My favorite hockey team, the Tampa Bay Lightning, have won the Stanley Cup 2 years in a row. These teams play each other best of 7, and man, they play hard hitting, hard skating, and in the end, of course, you get the winner. But there's another piece to it. After every playoff series in hockey, they do this. And that's a part that I really like about the game. These guys were there trying to kill each other 10 minutes ago. Now the game's over, the series is over, and they'll line up on the ice and they'll skate across and shake hands with each other. And it's a great piece of hockey, right? It's a great tradition in hockey. Right? Modern politics. Is it win-lose or is it win only? No consideration. In fact, attacking, humiliating the opponent, making fun of them, calling them names. It used to be, here's my ideas and they're better than my opponents. Now it seems like it's all about image and mudslinging. So here's another video. This goes back to maybe a time where that wasn't the case. Abraham Lincoln. It's a clip from the movie Lincoln, and it's about the 13th Amendment and trying to do something for other people, the end of slavery. Right? And what's interesting with Lincoln, if you read about him, most all of these people on his cabinet, including this guy, Seward, was actually the nominee for the Republican Party, or thought to be the best nominee. and Lincoln somehow gets the nomination. Lincoln asked Seward, his rival for the Republican nomination, to be his Secretary of State. Lincoln surrounded himself with people that didn't agree with him all the time. In fact, many of them thought they could have done a better job. But over time, he wins them over with his common sense, his thinking, and so they become staunch supporters. But he didn't surround himself with a bunch of yes men. Oh, that's a great idea. He wanted people to tell him, no, sir, that's a terrible idea. Unfortunately, we don't see much of that anymore either. It's a bunch of people who think exactly the same as the president, right? The cabinet tends to reflect them. And I understand that to a degree, but man, I want some critics. I want somebody to tell me hey, Emperor, you don't have any clothes on. So here's some videos. None of them are all that long if you're interested, but this to me kind of illustrates the idea of win. Win only, and I don't care what happens. The mortgage meltdown. Wall Street bankers were getting filthy rich, but it brought the country, once the housing market bubble popped, to the brink of another Great Depression. And it's funny how, as we become more interdependent, I guess, how smaller groups can really bring the entire economic system to its knees. So this is the best explanation I've ever heard about that. It's a clip from a movie. Hey, Wells Fargo. You guys maybe don't remember this, but it wasn't all that long ago that they made up over 2 million fake accounts, fake bank accounts, fake credit card accounts, because it made them look like, man, Wells Fargo's doing great business. And it affected people's credit because they didn't even know these accounts existed. So what did they care about? They cared about their stock price going up. They cared about money, and that was it. And we'll do anything to do it. In fact, we'll screw our own customers to do it. And then a couple other ones. This is a funny clip about Wells Fargo. If you want to watch it, there is some bad language in it. But the American dream. Not to get too long-winded on this because it'll make us go forever. But if you look at the quantification of what the American dream initially was, I think it was an idea. Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. Granted, all men are created equal was hypocritical at the time, and people would argue the founders were hypocrites. Well, I disagree. I think what they did was they took that idea, they stuck it on the wall, and they said, here's what we want to become. And we continue to form a more perfect union, right? We try to move toward that. Hopefully every day. Sometimes we take steps backwards because of individual egotism or greed. In the 1950s, after World War II, you saw the American dream begin to get quantified as, the house, white picket fence, 2.4 kids. It became more about things, about stuff, as opposed to ideals. And then now, and I've done this with my high school classes, and I keep doing it. What's the American dream now? Most of them will say to make money. And it seems like we've moved away from those lofty ideals that we started with. And ethical behavior, absolutely not. None of this was. And so, is it harsh? I will never do business with any of those companies because they've been criminal in their behavior. Volkswagen cheating on the emissions tests, if you remember that. Yeah, I know Volkswagen is made here in Chattanooga. I'll never buy anything from that company because they believed in this win only. And how they thought they weren't going to get caught escapes me. Are they so smart that nobody's ever going to figure out that the computer switches when it goes into an emission test mode and then switches back when it's on the highway? You know who caught them? A bunch of college students going, man, something's wrong with this test. And they kept digging and they found out what happened. That the programming in the computer did that. Pretty smart college kids. Okay, enough on that. Right. So I guess the thing to wrap it up would be try to think when you can, is there a win-win out there? Is there a compromise? Sometimes it has to be a win-lose depending on what the situation is. Avoid the lose-lose, the revenge piece, and then understand sometimes we put other people first. So there is scenarios where lose-win is appropriate. Okay, talking about diversity and the idea of other ideas. Look, that's the stock picture of a diverse group. And if you look at that group, it doesn't look like a classroom. Well, I guess I look like this guy here, right? So, you look around in groups where you work, you probably see diversity in that respect. So what I do is an exercise on diversity, and then we talk about it a little bit. So I can't do it completely this way, but what I do is I went and pulled a few of the faces out of the crowd, and I'll ask the class, what job does this person have? So as I throw these up there, at least in your own mind, think about it. What would she do in company X that makes blenders or makes computer software, or whatever it is? What's her job? How about him? You can see where I'm going with this. Because your brain almost instantly looks at that person, what they look like, how they're dressed perhaps, and assigns some kind of ranking, some kind of hierarchy within that company. And what's interesting, not funny, it's interesting, is the responses are almost always the same, or at least in the realm of similar. That people look at these folks and they go, that person does X. And so here, I'll tell you, receptionist, secretary, something like that. Kind of outgoing, somebody at the front where people come into the business. Okay? This guy, very often the president, maybe his vice president. And that's an interesting dynamic, male to female there. And we'll come back to that here in just a second. This guy, I think it's because he's got something around, it looks like headphones. He often gets put in as somebody in IT, right? In the tech side of things. She usually gets the most weird responses, like crazy woman, right? Which isn't really fair. Both of these guys are very often either middle managers or salesmen. Again, smiling, have that kind of, they look like they're outgoing, personality-wise. And this guy is usually captured as a newbie, somebody that just got hired, brand new to the job. Okay? So, I got these all. I didn't mean to do that. Let's go back. So, what I do once that's done is I go, okay, so you guys are saying this guy's president of the company and she's vice president, right? Yeah, that's right. Okay. Now let's look at the original picture. Who's the president? Because now you look at the dynamic of positioning. So likely she's the president. Maybe he's a vice president or a salesman or something like that. Okay? It's like there's a question out there or a story. It's a thought bubble, kind of like some of the Kahneman System 2 thinking. It goes, I'll make it quick. Doctor, he is driving home, right, from work. And he comes around the corner, he's getting close to his house, and he sees ambulance, police, there's a big wreck in the road, so he's stuck. And he looks, and he can see through all of the other vehicles that it's his son's car that's in the accident. And he sees, in fact, his son getting loaded on the gurney and put in the ambulance to be taken to the hospital. So he's freaking out. And so when the traffic finally clears, he hauls butt to get to the hospital. He goes running into the emergency room, goes through the 2 doors, and he gets there just in time that they're wheeling his son into the operating room, and the doctor that's going to operate on him comes out and says, I can't work on him. He's my son. And you ask, how's that possible? And you get some kind of cockamamie answers, well, they're gay, whatever. The answer is the doctor that was going to operate on him is his mother. Right? We said he, so they're both doctors, right? Husband and wife. But don't we sometimes assign jobs to a certain sex or a certain race, a role in society? And I asked this in class, are there jobs that you think of are typically female jobs? And oftentimes you'll get nurse, but that's changing. You'll get teacher, but that's not, maybe in elementary school there's more women teachers. There's a lot of men teachers out there. And so the same idea with men. Give me a male job, electrician, welder, auto mechanic. Okay, I get it, but aren't there female auto mechanics? Hell, there's female fighter pilots now. So that idea, there's no real assigned role for a job. If you can do it well, that's all that really matters, isn't it? What you look like, and I said this in something recently, I have never found what you look like to matter a damn as to how well you can do your job. I want the best person. I don't care what they look like. Okay? So think about that with diversity as well. So that was the job association. Kind of fun, I guess. Fun. Hoo-wee. Pros, brings in more ideas, brings in varied ideas, can come up with a solution that maybe me or another 58-year-old white dude didn't think of, right? So there are pros to it. Are there cons? Gasp. You can't say that, right? That's politically incorrect. There can be. And bear with me for a minute. What I've seen occasionally is forced diversity. That we are going to get a mix of people because of what they look like. I want the best skills. So if we force diversity instead of letting it be organic and using the ideas of different people, I think it can work against the organization. Okay? And of course, there's negative examples that you get any group together, you may have the pinhead racist. Racism, in Mike's opinion, is ignorance, period. Sexism, same thing. The idea of stereotypes. Oh, you're a girl. What do you know about fixing a car? Well, interesting. 2 weeks ago, the Chattanooga Motor Car Festival, you know who beat me in one of the races? It was a girl in basically the same car I have. Why? Because she was a better driver than I was. So it has nothing to do with that, right? It's what you bring to the table. One other thing too, I'd ask you to try to defer. It's hard to, but first impressions are strong, right? So when you look at somebody, try to look beyond the first impression and get to know who they are and what they really can do. Because first impressions can maybe have us cast aside somebody that was the perfect candidate for the job, and because it was a 50-year-old Hispanic female, you're like, what does she know about welding? Who knows? Not until you get to know she might be the best welder on the planet. Okay? So they're out there, but try to look beyond first impressions. I won't say ignore them. I mean, it's a human trait. Okay? So let's try to kind of wrap all this up with the last piece of, and this gets back into that quote of the day, time management. And this is a question I ask in class. Do you schedule your priorities, or probably like, it's the same thing. He's asking a stupid question. Maybe yes, maybe no. Is there a difference? There is. And let's talk through it a little bit. Scheduling your priorities. Let's think of the list maker. I'm one of them, right? If I sit down and go, okay, here's what I have to get done, and I write them down. Generally, you write those down in priority order. So I'm building a schedule based on what's most important for me that day. Okay? And hold that thought about important versus urgent. That's what we're really going to close up with. I make my schedule based on my priorities, and then I go through and execute it. And I may have to skip one based on something. And I may not get through all 6 things I was supposed to get done today. But those last 2 maybe weren't all that important. And those can move to the next day or the next week, whatever it is. And eventually maybe they will rise to the level of, man, I got to get those couple things done. And now they become important. So build your schedule based on what's important is much different than prioritizing a schedule, okay? What that means is I'm kind of jumping around. I don't really have a schedule. I'm putting out fires close to me, right? And, don't get too confused with this. It's just the idea of thinking ahead, being proactive, and putting your priorities in an order to get them done. So that's why those, I would say, are different. Scheduling your priorities is proactive, thinking ahead. Prioritizing what's on your schedule, and oftentimes it gets blown up by your kids. Hey, can you bring my stuff to school? I forgot it. And all of a sudden my schedule gets, I got to do something else. Right? I'd rather be proactive than reactive. Look, if you're prioritizing what's on your schedule, at least you're getting something done. But I want to start the day with a plan. And then if the plan changes, at least I can adapt. If I don't have a plan, I'm just kind of putting out those fires randomly. And look, you see people do that all the time. They're driving around, racing around town, phone glued to their head. Their life's in chaos because they don't think ahead. Again, a classroom activity. Think about, are these time-saving devices? Checking on something real quick. Is it quicker to throw your stuff in the washing machine than to go down to the river and beat your clothes with a rock? The answer is yes. Okay. What about this? And I get some argument on this. Put all your dishes in the dishwasher and turn it on. I guarantee I can wash stuff in the sink quicker than the dishwasher because with all of its cycles, etc. But what does it do? It doesn't save time, but it kind of displaces time. I close the door, hit start, now I can go do something else. So in that sense, it is kind of a time-saving device, isn't it? So a lot of technology is cast as such. This will save you time. This will make your life easier. Whenever you hear that, be skeptical. Go, yeah. If that was the case, all the labor-saving devices that are out there, we'd be sitting around, penning poems all day. So don't buy it. It's mostly a bunch of BS. All right, the second box. This comes from President Eisenhower way back when. Okay? And this gets to the idea of important and urgent. Okay? And what he did was he took those ideas and he made 4 boxes. And what I would suggest to you is most of the time, not always, there's always some small stuff down here that we have to get done. But we want to work on things above this line. Stuff that is important to us, that has significance, may affect our future. And of those, if that's the case, do we want to work on stuff that's urgent or not urgent? Most of the time I get the answer, I want to work in quadrant 1. I want to be important and urgent. Needs to get done. Do it now. The answer is no. You want to do stuff that's important, but you want to do it back here. And it goes back to the idea of time management gives me more time to do a better job. Because remember what urgent was? Important. We said it has significance, great significance. Could affect our life, right? Urgent meant it had to get done right now. There's a deadline. So if I can work on a worksheet, and I know that's a lame example, how about get the car ready for a race? How about give consideration to a big decision about buying a new house? That's important. No kidding. I want to do it before it becomes urgent. Before my rent runs out, I need to find a new place to live. So where you want to live as much as possible is in quadrant 2. It's important, but I have time to think about it. Where do procrastinators live? People that put stuff off. It's important, but now they let that time slip away. And all of a sudden now they have 6 things due because it's urgent, and I can only do 3 of them. Or I do all 6 in a really crappy manner. Sometimes that happens. Look, life, it happens. Every once in a while, if you try to work in quadrant 2, things can slide over here. But as long as that's the exception, not the rule, then you're going to have more time to do things. And every once in a while, yeah, man, I got to get this knocked out. Bam, do it. Okay? And then down here, the idea of it's urgent, but it's not important. At least not to me, or at least maybe not to the company. So delegate it. Let somebody else work on that. That's why I use that as a word of the day, right? And then Eisenhower said, and I tend to agree with him, if it's not important and it's not urgent, then get rid of it. Maybe it's something that doesn't need to be done. I find that on my lists sometimes, is I'll have a list of stuff to do, and you get to the bottom, you're like, you know what? I really don't even need to do that. Or maybe it's down there and I go, hey, Junior, hey, Mama, can you pick this up on the way home from work? Somebody else help with this. So I'm not spending an hour and a half on one little task when somebody else could do it on their way home. Okay? So that's the idea. We want to work in quadrant 2 as much as possible. It's important, and I have time to think or work or do, not rush the job. I hope that makes sense. This is, I think, a very important concept. Okay? And where do procrastinators live? We just said that. It's important, but I got to get it done now. And if you live there, your life is chaos. That you're putting out those fires, right? You're not scheduling your priorities. You're just figuring out what's the next thing that's going to bite me in the butt and get it done. That's no way to live. So how do you do this? Some specifics on time management. This is my style. One is, at least I used to, and it's kind of been worked out of the system, was there was a thing called Reminder Fox. on the computer, and you would plug things in, and every once in a while a little window would pop up and say, here's what to do, here's what you're supposed to do today, and what's coming up in the next week, the next month. Unfortunately, they've gotten rid of that. So what I've done is from here, I've kind of evolved to or devolved to an app on my phone. And I've tried to get in the habit of something comes up. I've got a meeting on Wednesday about this kids electric race car thing in Chattanooga. I get that. All of a sudden there's a scheduled meeting. Phone, bam, add it to my to-do list. And so this here has become this, kind of the same idea. So I have it here, and I have it one other place. And I've heard from students, they say, man, I've got 6, 7 different, I've got a planner, and I use sticky notes, and I've got a whiteboard, and I've got this, and I've got that. Like, you can have too many reminders, because if you have 5, 6, 7 of them, you got to keep them all in sync, right? Otherwise, if each has something on it, and you're like, well, is that right? Is this one right? Which one's the right one? So I suggest a couple, a planner, right? A physical booklet. We used to carry those around all the time. Some people still do. A phone, an app, something like that. And then apps that actually help. I use this one. It's called To Do. It's okay. It keeps bugging me about pay us money, we'll get rid of your commercials. Maybe I'll find a better one. And then this. I have this down in my kitchen. And so these are, it's a revolving calendar, and it reflects here. And it takes me a couple seconds to sync up my phone with my whiteboard. And the beauty of this is I walk out the door to go to class in the morning. I take a look at it. Same thing in the evening. It's instant. And you can tell, hey, there's nothing going on this Wednesday. Or you can look at a day and go, holy mackerel, there's 5 things I got to do on Tuesday. Right? So it's a really easy visual way of seeing what's going on. And look, on the to-do, I don't put things like breathe, go to the bathroom. This is stuff, big ticket stuff that I need to get done, not the day-to-day put the trash out. I do put the recycling on there just because it comes every other week and I'll forget when to put it out. Okay, so put as much as necessary to keep yourself organized. And that's my style. Okay, here's what I would recommend to you. I don't know if you've done it this semester, but as you start the spring in January, the next semester, I would get all of, each class has a syllabus. Each class has a schedule of what we're doing that day. Okay? Get all of those for all 2, 3, 4 classes. Get that last page, like what we have for our class. Look at it and write down all the due dates. Or better yet, get a Word document or get your planner or your phone, whatever it is. Look through it and go, okay, no-show assignment, October 17th. Quiz 1, October 24th. Ethical dilemma, November 5th. And you can write all these down. And when you do that for every single class, now you can look at it and go, holy mackerel, man. Week 3 of April is a train wreck because I've put all the deadlines in, and you can look at that. And, you know, it's up to you how much of this other recurring stuff, work, childcare, club meetings, things like that, how much you put in detail-wise. But with that, you can look at your schedule for the semester and go, good Lord, there's 5 things due that 3rd week of April. And you know it in January. And so you can start working on getting a couple of those things knocked out. Remember in quadrant 2, important, not urgent. Get them going, get them done, and now when that 3rd week of April comes up, maybe there's still 2 things I have to get done, but that's a whole lot easier than 5. So that's what I mean. You kind of build this master plan, and you can look ahead of time. What's that called? It's called proactive, planning ahead. So I would recommend that. And it worked for me quite well when I was getting my PhD. Okay? Check the plan at the start of each week and each night and morning, what's coming up. That's my technique. Here's kind of what's going on in the week. And then when I'm going to bed, I'll take a look. Okay, this is what's going on in the next few days. So I keep abreast of what's happening so that I don't show up to, you know, I look at my phone, oh crap, I got this today. Or a better example, school-wise, would be you show up to class and you go, there's a quiz today. If you ever say that to yourself, your time management is not up to snuff. You should never be surprised. Never. I say that. You should not be surprised often. How's that? So, these things. And I would say my grades can help. You look at my grades, you go, I get a 0. Man, I know I turned that in. Go back and look. Did I email it to Breaky? I did. Why didn't he grade it? Hey, I emailed this to you professionally. I emailed this to you on October 31st. Did you get it? Let me look. Oh, I did. I put it in the wrong folder. Okay? I've got hundreds of students. So, yep, sorry, I'll fix it. Okay? Otherwise, the answer is no, I didn't get it. Better yet, you go, I got a 0 in that. Let me see. And you look, you go, oh crap, I didn't send it. Maybe it's still a draft. I forgot to hit send. But you can see that in time to get at least a grade because of the late policy, as opposed to weeks later or the end of the semester. One of my least favorite stories, I was teaching night school, right? And it was 6-week classes, 4 hours once a week. So these were long sessions. And it gets to the end, and there was one student, she hadn't turned in basically anything for the whole 6 weeks. And she comes up to me at the last class as we're leaving to finish for the night. She goes, hey, is there anything I can do to pass this class? And I wasn't being a smart aleck, but I said, yeah, take it again. You can't put all this stuff off and expect to throw it in. That's one of the paradigm changes from high school. There's no extra credit, and there's very little slop time. So, something to change in your paradigm. Keep your focus, man. Put the phone away. Right? You've got mail. Distraction, same thing. And we've talked about these. 45-minute rule was don't cram for 6 hours. Every 45 minutes, study for a little while, take a break. Know when you're best. Are you a morning person or are you an evening person? Right? Know your own body clock. And here's one more I'll mention in the realm of time management as we kind of wrap up here. Sleep. Do you lay in bed and your brain's going, man, I got 7, 8, 9, 10 things to do. It's trying to keep those ideas afloat so you don't forget them. What I found works for me is actually this. The phone does help if I put it in here. But if I'm in bed and I keep a little notepad next to my alarm clock. And if I've got something on my mind where I'm trying to go to sleep and it keeps kind of coming up and it's keeping me awake, I just write it down. It may not even be something to do. It's just a thought about, hey, try this with the race car. Or try this with, something on the house I got to fix. And as soon as I jot that down, now my brain goes, I don't have to keep this recurring memory circling around in your brain because it's written down. And it helps me go to sleep. And then you wake up in the morning and you go, oh yeah, now I remember. Okay? So maybe try that as well. Parents, learn how to say no. If you schedule your priorities but then let your kids destroy that schedule every day, and learn how to say no. You forgot your homework? Pfft, I'm not bringing it. Come back and get it. Maybe the teacher will accept it late. Maybe she won't. Maybe you should have your act together, Junior. And you got to keep doing it long enough to become a habit. Last thing, long videos make me stressed out. I promise. There's one more after this. I want to revisit the idea of stress that we introduced at least at the beginning. And I asked this question in class. All stress is bad, true or false? And usually the answer I get is true, that all stress is bad. The answer is no. And here's the thing. If you look at the X and Y axis, human performance, stress level. Notice what happens. As stress level goes up to a point, performance goes up. Think about athletes who talk about being in the zone, right? Or you've probably been there yourself, where you're just churning out something. You're writing a paper, something at work. So some stress is good. It actually increases human performance. But as it gets beyond peak, you get into the distress side. And you've seen this, I'm sure, fatigue, exhaustion, to the point that it can burn you out. You can have a mental breakdown. And I would argue the end point here of too much stress might be suicide, which is terrible. Okay, so yes, you can have too little, right? Laying on the couch, drinking a beer, watching Family Guy. It's cool, but you ain't accomplishing anything. So somewhere in this realm, and if you're a leader, I think you want to keep your people not here all the time, just occasionally when it's necessary, but somewhere on this slope. And when there's a chance to kind of decompress and take some stress out, do it. But work in this area. And try to keep your folks and yourself in that area. So not all stress is bad. Some stress is good. It increases our performance. And here's a wacky concept, but man, does this sound like a good midterm test question. Last thing, I promise. Bluma Zagarnik, right, strange name. She did a bunch of research showing how the human mind does not like unfinished tasks. It's like that thing of laying in bed and a bunch of ideas running around in your head so I can't sleep. And she looked at it and she said, you know what? If I have a bunch of tasks that I need to get done and they're not, i.e. important and urgent because I haven't done them, it causes psychic tension. It causes stress, right? So have you thought of that? Have you seen that? If you have a task that's not done, doesn't it sit in the back of your head and bug you? Your brain is uncomfortable with that. So as soon as you complete it, it's like, whew, I love it when I can cross things off the list. It makes you feel good. That's why I like list making. End of the day, you look at it and you go, I got a lot done today. Intrinsic motivation. In other words, it takes a lot of mental effort when you've got a bunch of things still to be done, or maybe they're just partially done. Right, I got them started. Look, sometimes there's a project you have and you can only get so far, and then you're waiting on a part or something, some help from another person. That's normal. But still, when it's sitting out there floating, doesn't that sit on your mind? It adds to stress. Why do you think people that run around prioritizing their schedule in the world of chaos are stressed out? Because they got a ton of things to do, and this is part of the stress level, the Zagarnik effect. Incomplete tasks, unmet goals. Don't they seem to always pop up, even if you try to forget about them? And look, doing this maybe helps you forget about them for a little bit, but they come back as soon as you sober up. Okay? Those important goals, you want to knock those out, get them done. So that's the Zagarnik effect. I think she's a genius. Right? Trouble sleeping, mind racing, that's what we just talked about. And if you want to look at, there's a link to the article itself. Okay. Man, a lot of stuff. And can you see now, hopefully you stuck with it, that there's a lot that's midterm testable out of that stuff, because we wrapped up a bunch of pieces to kind of put a period on the first half of this class. Okay? Right. So I'll end that and open up the midterm here, probably around the 3rd of November, just a little bit earlier than what it says in the syllabus, which gives you more time. But again, November 7th by 11:59, so don't start at 11:45. Let's start it early so you can get it done. Good luck with the midterm. Keep the questions coming, and I will see you on the next video as we start the second half of the class.